Alice's evidence.
Доказательства Алисы.
Alice's evidence. Here, cried Alice, quite forgetting how large she was.
Вот, вскрикнула Алиса, совершенно забыв, насколько она велика.
Here, cried Alice, quite forgetting how large she was. She jumped up in such a hurry.
Она вскочила так резко.
She jumped up in such a hurry that she upset the jury box with the edge of her skirt.
Что сдвинула скамью присяжных краем юбки.
That she upset the jury box with the edge of her skirt, sending all the jurors onto the heads of the crowd below.
Перевернув всю толпу присяжных головой вниз.
Sending all the jurors onto the heads of the crowd below. Oh, I'm so sorry, she exclaimed.
Ах, мне очень жаль, воскликнула она.
Oh, I'm so sorry, she exclaimed. And began picking them up again as quickly as she could.
И начала поднимать их обратно быстро, как могла.
And began picking them up again as quickly as she could. The trial cannot go on, said the king in a very grave voice.
Суд не может продолжаться, сказал король очень серьезным голосом.
The trial cannot go on, said the king in a very grave voice. Until all the jurors are back in their proper places, all.
Пока все присяжные не вернутся на свои места, все.
Until all the jurors are back in their proper places, all. He repeated, looking hard at Alice.
Повторил он, пристально глядя на Алису.
He repeated, looking hard at Alice. Alice looked at the jury box and saw.
Алиса посмотрела на скамью присяжных и увидела.
Alice looked at the jury box and saw that the lizard was sitting with his head downwards.
Что ящер сидит, опустив голову.
That the lizard was sitting with his head downwards. And the poor little creature could only wave its tail about.
И бедное маленькое существо может только шевелить хвостом.
And the poor little creature could only wave its tail about. She soon got it out again, and put it right.
Тут же она вытащила его и посадила на место.
She soon got it out again, and put it right. The jurors immediately began to write down a history of the accident.
Присяжные сразу же начали записывать историю случившегося.
The jurors immediately began to write down a history of the accident. All except the lizard.
Все, кроме ящера.
All except the lizard. Who could only sit with its mouth open.
Который мог сидеть только с открытым ртом.
Who could only sit with its mouth open. What do you know about this business? The king said to Alice.
Что ты знаешь об этом деле? Сказал король Алисе.
What do you know about this business? The king said to Alice. Nothing, said Alice.
Ничего, сказала Алиса.
Nothing, said Alice. Nothing at all, asked the king.
Ничего вообще? Спросил король.
Nothing at all, asked the king. Nothing at all, said Alice.
Ничего вообще, сказала Алиса.
Nothing at all, said Alice. That's very important, the king said, turning to the jury.
Это очень важно, сказал король, обращаясь к присяжным.
That's very important, the king said, turning to the jury. They were just beginning to write this down on their slates.
Они только начали записывать это на своих сланцах.
They were just beginning to write this down on their slates. When the white rabbit interrupted.
Как белый кролик прервал.
When the white rabbit interrupted. Unimportant, your majesty means, of course.
Неважно, ваше величество, конечно.
Unimportant, your majesty means, of course. He said very politely.
Сказал он очень вежливо.
He said very politely. But frowning and making faces at the king as he spoke.
Но хмурясь и корчась на короля, пока говорил.
but frowning and making faces at the king as he spoke. Unimportant, of course, I meant.
Неважно, конечно, я имел в виду.
Unimportant, of course, I meant. The king hastily said, and went on to himself in a low voice.
Спешно сказал король и вполголоса сказал себе.
The king hastily said, and went on to himself in a low voice. Important, unimportant, unimportant, important.
Важно, неважно, неважно, важно.
Important, unimportant, unimportant, important. Some of the jury wrote it down, important.
Некоторые присяжные записали важно.
Some of the jury wrote it down, important. And some, unimportant.
А некоторые неважно.
And some, unimportant. The king was busily writing in his notebook.
Король усердно записал в своей записной книжке.
The king was busily writing in his notebook. Then he cried out, silence.
Затем он закричал тихо.
Then he cried out, silence. And read out from his book, Rule 42.
И прочитал из своей книги правило 42.
And read out from his book, Rule 42. All persons more than a mile high must leave the court.
Все лица высотой более мили должны покинуть суд.
All persons more than a mile high must leave the court. Everybody looked at Alice.
Все посмотрели на Алису.
Everybody looked at Alice. I'm not a mile high, said Alice.
Я ростом не в милю, сказала Алиса.
I'm not a mile high, said Alice. You are, said the king.
Да, ты, сказал король.
You are, said the king. Nearly 2 miles high, added the queen.
Почти 2 мили в высоту, добавила королева.
Nearly 2 miles high, added the queen. Well, I won't go, at any rate, said Alice.
Ну, я не уйду, в любом случае, сказала Алиса.
Well, I won't go, at any rate, said Alice. And it's not a regular rule, you invented it just now.
И это необычное правило, ты придумал только что.
And it's not a regular rule, you invented it just now. It's the oldest rule in the book, said the king.
Это самое старое правило в книге, сказал король.
It's the oldest rule in the book, said the king. Then it must be number 1, said Alice.
Тогда оно должно быть под номером 1, сказала Алиса.
Then it must be number 1, said Alice. The king turned pale, and shut his notebook hastily.
Король побледнел и поспешно закрыл свою записную книжку.
The king turned pale, and shut his notebook hastily. Think over your verdict.
Подумайте над своим вердиктом.
Think over your verdict. He said to the jury, in a low, trembling voice.
Сказал он присяжным тихим, дрожащим голосом.
He said to the jury, in a low, trembling voice. We have more evidence, Your Majesty.
У нас есть еще доказательства, Ваше Величество.
We have more evidence, Your Majesty. Said the white rabbit, jumping up in a great hurry.
Сказал белый кролик, резко подпрыгнув.
Said the white rabbit, jumping up in a great hurry. We have this paper.
У нас есть этот документ.
We have this paper. What's in it? Said the queen.
Что там? Спросила королева.
What's in it? Said the queen. It seems to be a letter from the prisoner to somebody.
Кажется, это письмо от заключенного кому-то.
It seems to be a letter from the prisoner to somebody. Said the white rabbit.
Сказал белый кролик.
Said the white rabbit. What's the address? Said one of the jurors.
Какой адресат? Сказал один из присяжных.
What's the address? Said one of the jurors. There's no address at all, said the white rabbit.
Нет никакого адреса, сказал белый кролик.
There's no address at all, said the white rabbit. He unfolded the paper as he spoke, and added.
Пока говорил, он развернул документ и добавил.
He unfolded the paper as he spoke, and added. It isn't a letter, after all, it's a poem.
В конце концов, это не письмо, это стихотворение.
It isn't a letter, after all, it's a poem. Is it in the prisoner's handwriting?
Это почерк заключенного.
Is it in the prisoner's handwriting? Asked another of the jurors.
Спросил другой из присяжных.
Asked another of the jurors. No, it isn't, said the white rabbit.
Нет, сказал белый кролик.
No, it isn't, said the white rabbit. And that's the strangest thing about it.
И это самое странное.
And that's the strangest thing about it. The jury all looked puzzled.
Все присяжные выглядели озадаченными.
The jury all looked puzzled. He imitated somebody else's handwriting, said the king.
Он подражал чьему-то почерку, сказал король.
He imitated somebody else's handwriting, said the king. The jury all brightened up again.
Присяжные все оживились.
The jury all brightened up again. Please your majesty, said the knave.
Пожалуйста, ваше величество, сказал валет.
Please your majesty, said the knave. I didn't write it, and they can't prove I did.
Я не писал это, и они не могут доказать.
I didn't write it, and they can't prove I did. There's no signature.
Подписи нет.
There's no signature. That only makes the matter worse, said the king.
Это только усугубляет ситуацию, сказал король.
That only makes the matter worse, said the king. You didn't sign it because you meant some mischief.
Вы не подписали, потому что замышляли зло.
You didn't sign it because you meant some mischief. There was a general applause at this.
На это последовали аплодисменты.
There was a general applause at this. That proves his guilt, said the queen.
Это доказывает его вину, сказала королева.
That proves his guilt, said the queen. It proves nothing of the sort, said Alice.
Это ничего не доказывает, сказала Алиса.
It proves nothing of the sort, said Alice. You don't even know what it is about.
Вы даже не знаете, о чем это.
You don't even know what it is about. Read it, said the king.
Прочти, сказал король.
Read it, said the king. The white rabbit put on his spectacles.
Белый кролик надел очки.
The white rabbit put on his spectacles. Where shall I begin, your majesty? He asked.
С чего мне начать, ваше величество? Спросил он.
Where shall I begin, your majesty? He asked. Begin at the beginning, the king said gravely.
Начни с самого начала, серьезно сказал король.
Begin at the beginning, the king said gravely. And go on till you come to the end, then stop.
И продолжай, пока не закончишь и остановись.
And go on till you come to the end, then stop. And the white rabbit read this.
И белый кролик прочитал.
And the white rabbit read this. I know that you came to her.
Я знаю, что ты пришел к ней.
I know that you came to her. And mentioned me to him.
И упомянул меня ему.
And mentioned me to him. She gave me a good character.
Она преподала мне хорошие манеры.
She gave me a good character. But said, oh, he can't swim.
Но сказала, ах, он не умеет плавать.
But said, oh, he can't swim. I gave her one, they gave him two.
Я дал ей один, они дали ему два.
I gave her 1, they gave him 2. You gave us 3 or more.
Ты дал нам 3 или более.
You gave us 3 or more. They all returned from him to you.
Все они вернулись от него к тебе.
They all returned from him to you. Though they were mine before.
Хотя раньше они были моими.
Though they were mine before. And I believe that what you mean.
И я полагаю, что ты имеешь в виду.
And I believe that what you mean. Though she had this fit.
Хотя ей это подходило.
Though she had this fit. Looks like an obstacle between.
Выглядит как препятствие между.
Looks like an obstacle between. Him, and ourselves, and it.
Ним, нами и этим.
Him, and ourselves, and it. That's a very important letter.
Это очень важное письмо.
That's a very important letter. Said the king, rubbing his hands.
Сказал король, потирая руки.
Said the king, rubbing his hands. So now let the jury.
Итак, пусть присяжные.
So now let the jury. Can anyone explain it? Said Alice.
Кто-нибудь может объяснить это? Сказала Алиса.
Can anyone explain it? Said Alice. She was so large now.
Теперь она была такой большой.
She was so large now. That she wasn't a bit afraid of interrupting the king.
Что не боялась прервать короля.
That she wasn't a bit afraid of interrupting the king. I'll give a sixpence to anyone who can.
Я дам 6 пенсов тому, кто может.
I'll give a sixpence to anyone who can. I don't believe there's any meaning in it.
Я не верю, что в этом есть какой-то смысл.
I don't believe there's any meaning in it. The jury all wrote down on their slates.
Все присяжные записали на своих сланцах.
The jury all wrote down on their slates. She doesn't believe there's any meaning in it.
Она не верит, что в этом есть какой-то смысл.
She doesn't believe there's any meaning in it. But none of them tried to explain the letter.
Но никто из них не пытался разъяснить письмо.
But none of them tried to explain the letter. I don't know, said the king.
Не знаю, сказал король.
I don't know, said the king. Looking at the poem with one eye.
Глядя на стихотворение одним глазом.
Looking at the poem with one eye. I seem to see some meaning in it, after all.
Кажется, в конце концов я вижу в этом смысл.
I seem to see some meaning in it, after all. Said, oh, he can't swim.
Говорится, ах, он не может плавать.
Said, oh, he can't swim. You can't swim, can you?
Ты не умеешь плавать, правда?
You can't swim, can you? He added, turning to the knave.
Добавил он, повернувшись к валету.
He added, turning to the knave. The knave shook his head sadly.
Валет печально покачал головой.
The knave shook his head sadly. All right, then, said the king.
Хорошо, сказал король.
All right, then, said the king. And he went on muttering over the poem to himself.
И он продолжил бормотать стихотворение про себя.
And he went on muttering over the poem to himself. I gave her 1, they gave him 2.
Я дал ей 1, они дали ему 2.
I gave her 1, they gave him 2. That's what he did with the tarts, you know.
Это то, что он сделал с пирогами, знаете.
That's what he did with the tarts, you know. But it goes on.
Но продолжение.
But it goes on. They all returned from him to you, said Alice.
Все они вернулись от него к тебе, сказала Алиса.
They all returned from him to you, said Alice. Well, there they are, said the king triumphantly.
Ну, вот они, сказал король торжествующе.
Well, there they are, said the king triumphantly, pointing to the tarts on the table.
Указывая на пироги на столе.
Pointing to the tarts on the table. Nothing can be clearer than that.
Ничто не может быть яснее, чем это.
Nothing can be clearer than that. Then again, though she had this fit.
С другой стороны, хотя ей это подходило.
Then again, though she had this fit. You never had fits, my dear, I think.
Думаю, тебе никогда не подходило, моя дорогая.
You never had fits, my dear, I think. He said to the queen.
Он сказал королеве.
He said to the queen. Never, said the queen furiously.
Никогда, сказала яростно королева.
Never, said the queen furiously. Throwing an inkstand at the lizard as she spoke.
Бросая чернильницу в ящера, пока говорила.
Throwing an inkstand at the lizard as she spoke. Then the words don't fit you, said the king.
Тогда слова тебе не подходят, сказал король.
Then the words don't fit you, said the king. Looking round the court with a smile.
Оглядывая зал с улыбкой.
Looking round the court with a smile. There was a dead silence.
Стояла мертвая тишина.
There was a dead silence. It's a joke, the king added in an offended tone.
Это шутка, добавил король оскорбленным тоном.
It's a joke, the king added in an offended tone. And everybody laughed.
И все засмеялись.
And everybody laughed. Let the jury think over their verdict.
Пусть присяжные обдумают свой вердикт.
Let the jury think over their verdict. The king said, for about the 20th time that day.
Сказал король около 20 раз в тот день.
The king said, for about the 20th time that day. No, no, said the queen.
Нет, нет, сказала королева.
No, no, said the queen. Sentence first, verdict later.
Сперва приговор, вердикт позже.
Sentence first, verdict later. Nonsense, said Alice loudly.
Чушь, сказала Алиса громко.
Nonsense, said Alice loudly. The idea of having the sentence first.
По идее, сперва приговор.
The idea of having the sentence first. Hold your tongue, said the queen, turning red.
Держи язык за зубами, сказала королева, краснее.
Hold your tongue, said the queen, turning red. I won't, said Alice.
Не буду, сказала Алиса.
I won't, said Alice. Off with her head, the queen shouted at the top of her voice.
Прочь ей голову, кричала королева во весь голос.
Off with her head, the queen shouted at the top of her voice. Nobody moved.
Никто не двинулся.
Nobody moved. Who cares for you, said Alice.
Кого ты волнуешь? Спросила Алиса.
Who cares for you, said Alice. You're only a pack of cards.
Ты всего лишь колода карт.
You're only a pack of cards. At this moment the whole pack rose up into the air and flew at her.
Тут же вся колода поднялась в воздух и полетела на нее.
At this moment the whole pack rose up into the air and flew at her. She screamed.
Она закричала.
She screamed. Half of fright and half of anger.
Наполовину испугавшись и наполовину рассердившись.
Half of fright and half of anger. And tried to beat them off and found herself lying on the bank.
Попыталась отбить их и осознала, что лежит на берегу.
And tried to beat them off and found herself lying on the bank. With her head in the lap of her sister.
Положив голову на колени сестры.
With her head in the lap of her sister. who was gently brushing away some dead leaves from her face,
которая аккуратно убирала с ее лица сухие листья.
who was gently brushing away some dead leaves from her face. Wake up, Alice dear, said her sister.
«Проснись, дорогая Алиса», — сказала сестра.
Wake up, Alice dear, said her sister. It was such a curious dream, said Alice.
«Это был такой странный сон», — сказала Алиса.
It was such a curious dream, said Alice. And she told her sister.
И она рассказала сестре.
And she told her sister. As well as she could remember them.
Насколько могла вспомнить.
As well as she could remember them. All these strange adventures of hers.
Все эти странные приключения.
All these strange adventures of hers. Then her sister kissed her and said.
Потом сестра поцеловала ее и сказала.
Then her sister kissed her and said. It was a curious dream, dear, certainly.
Это, конечно, был любопытный сон, дорогая.
It was a curious dream, dear, certainly. But now run home, or you'll be late for your tea.
Но теперь беги домой, или опоздаешь на чай.
But now run home, or you'll be late for your tea. Alice got up and ran off, thinking about her wonderful dream.
Алиса встала и побежала, думая о своем чудесном сне.
Alice got up and ran off, thinking about her wonderful dream. But her sister was sitting still, leaning her head on her hand.
Но ее сестра сидела неподвижно, оперев голову на руку.
But her sister was sitting still, leaning her head on her hand. Watching the setting sun, and thinking of little Alice.
Наблюдая за заходящим солнцем и думая о маленькой Алисе.
Watching the setting sun, and thinking of little Alice. And all her wonderful adventures.
И всех ее удивительных приключениях.
And all her wonderful adventures. Till she too began dreaming, and this was her dream.
Пока тоже не начала мечтать, и это была ее мечта.
Till she too began dreaming, and this was her dream. First, she dreamed of little Alice herself.
Сначала она мечтала о маленькой Алисе.
First, she dreamed of little Alice herself. And the whole place around her became alive.
И все вокруг нее ожило.
And the whole place around her became alive. With the strange creatures of her little sister's dream.
Странными созданиями мечты ее младшей сестры.
With the strange creatures of her little sister's dream. So she sat on, with closed eyes.
Поэтому она сидела с закрытыми глазами.
So she sat on, with closed eyes. And half believed herself in Wonderland.
И наполовину поверила в страну чудес.
And half believed herself in Wonderland. Though she knew she had only to open her eyes again.
Хотя она знала, что ей нужно только открыть глаза.
Though she knew she had only to open her eyes again. And all would change to dull reality.
И все изменится к скучной реальности.
And all would change to dull reality. Then, she pictured to herself Alice as a grown woman.
Затем она представила Алису взрослой женщиной.
Then, she pictured to herself Alice as a grown woman. With the simple and loving heart of her childhood.
С простым и любящим сердцем детства.
With the simple and loving heart of her childhood. And how she would gather about other little children.
И тем, как она собирала других маленьких детей.
And how she would gather about other little children. And make their eyes bright and eager with strange tales.
И заставляла их глаза сиять и пылать от удивительных историй.
And make their eyes bright and eager with strange tales. Maybe even with the dream of Wonderland.
Может быть, даже с мечтой о стране чудес.
Maybe even with the dream of Wonderland. Remembering her own child life, and the happy summer days.
Вспоминая свою детскую жизнь и счастливые летние дни.
Remembering her own child life, and the happy summer days.
Вам нравится учить английский с нами? Тогда подпишитесь на наш канал, чтобы не пропустить новое видео. И не забудьте поставить лайк. До новых встреч!